Evening, welcome to yet another Forever Blue right here on XS Manchester 106.1 FM. This is what you might call your one-stop shop for all things Manchester City. I'm Ian Cheesman, and joining me tonight, because he's been a bit poorly, that is Paul Lake, who's normally alongside me, is a certain other City legend, David White. And you come in off the back of a 5-0 win at Cardiff, David, so it's all good things to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Another strong start to the season. A lot of the players, well, I suppose a lot of players for every team had a really difficult, really sort of tough summer in terms of work. So it's great depth to the squad, and there's been some good performances, and it's like business as usual.
Were you worried after the home defeat against Lyon that this might not just be a blip, that there might be a little bit of a stumble?
No, I think it was really disappointing, that game. I think I just felt we were a little bit bullied in the game, to be honest with you. I was there, and it did surprise me. But I think also the fact that the manager wasn't on the side of the pitch, I think, made a massive difference, personally.
You played the game. Why would it make much difference? To me, as an onlooker, I think, what difference would it make?
Well, I think he really does sort of play the game from there, doesn't he? He's like, having a second captain or a captain. We seem to lack a little bit of a lead. It was maybe one or two people I was with said they thought that Vinny Company would play because, purely because the manager wasn't there. I think that's a great point. I think we did miss that leadership and just that ability to really sort of impact on the game. So I think it was a big miss.
It's funny you should say that, actually, about leadership, because down at Cardiff, I particularly spotted this, and I don't know if people watching on TV, especially on the highlights, would have even seen this, but when Fernandinho went off, who had been wearing the captain's armband, John Stones was coming on at that point, and he gave him the captain's armband, and there was clearly a message to John Stones, either from Pep or from Fernandinho as he went off, to pass this armband on to Fabian Delph. So he trots across to the other side of the pitch, carrying the armband in his hand, gives it to Fabian Delph, who then looks completely dumbfounded and sort of, what is this and why are you giving it to me? It was almost cartoonish the way that he was looking around, because I was watching it and not everybody would have been seeing this, and he's like, better get on with the game. So he plays a few minutes holding the captain's armband, and then there's another bit of a conversation, and the armband ends up going to Nicolas Otamendi, who then puts it on. He didn't look particularly convinced he should be putting it on either. And then Otamendi became the captain for the rest of the game. Now, on the way back, I'm talking to Stuart Brennan, who I travelled to the away games with, who's the City's correspondent on the Manchester Evening News. And he says City have actually got 5 captains. Vincent Kompany's number 1, David Silva, Sergio Aguero.
De Bruyne's one.
And Fernandinho. Yeah. So none of the 5 of them were actually playing. So this is why it ended up being at number 6, Otamendi. Now, obviously, that is true, what I've just said to you, but should there be a more sort of strenuous leader? That's a more serious question, especially in the absence of Pep Guardiola.
I definitely think so, and I'd have thought if Delph was playing, he'd have been quite an obvious choice. I think he is a talker. I think just watching the Amazon documentary, he's a lot of them are vocal, but not really that constructive. Just quite funny. But I think Delph's got a bit of a... Well, we know he's got a bit of fire in his belly, and time to time that's what you need. And obviously the language can be a barrier. I think again, looking at the programme, you're quite surprised sometimes at the sort of level of English with these guys that have been here for many years. You'd expect them to speak a lot more fluently, wouldn't you? So can't really understand Delph either, to be honest, with his Bradford accent. But I think it's massively important having a leader, and City can get away with it because he is so vocal on the side of the pitch, isn't he? And he is kicking every single ball. It's interesting to see that.
So you genuinely think that against Lyon, City lacked leadership from the touchline, and that played a significant part?
I was on the other side of the pitch. No, generally, if I'm in the main stand, you obviously can see what's happening. As much as Arteta, he was up there, I didn't really see the dynamic of what was happening. I'd probably seen that more if I was watching on TV as well. I was over with Gary on the other side. So it was difficult for me to see that. So really, I'm really making the point that it's, I think, automatically the fact that Pep wasn't there, because we know how vocal he is, we know how much he can influence a game, sort of move by move, minute by minute. So he's bound to be a loss.
obviously back to normal at Cardiff and some fantastic goals. I mean, that pretty much every goal that was scored was a picture perfect goal. Perhaps the Mahrez tapping, but at least the build up to that was fantastic as well. But of course, against Leon in midweek, there was a lot of discussion, as there always is from opposition supporters, about these so-called empty seats. And I don't want to sort of steer away from that, but equally I don't want City fans listening to think what are you doing? What are you giving this airtime for? But it is a valid thing, isn't it? Why do you have a theory as to why the ground's not full for these big games? Because there's so many theories.
The Leon game, I think the difficulty with it is that it doesn't kind of mean anything, that first game, does it? That I think there was it really didn't matter. Even going away, has anybody, did it hurt anybody that much that we got beat in that game? Because I think 99% of City fans will have come away from that game saying, so what? So I just don't. It can be boring though. I know it's great that when you can qualify after 3 or 4 games, that's fantastic. But I don't know if there's another format. I mean, I was sort of toying around the other day with whether they could almost still have a 2-match home and away format, but in a league. So you played Leon twice for 3 points. Whether that would keep everything, so it almost didn't matter what it matters because it's but you've still got to go over there and win it again or something like that. There's just and I don't know what's going to happen with this. The third tournament, I have no idea.
Don't talk about that. No,
that can only because they're not going to just go back to a traditional Champions League and
they're not going to do the Cup Winners' Cup, are they?
No. So I can only think whether is it going to be a second tier Europe. I have no idea. But I just think early on, if fans don't have to go there and pay the 30 or the 40 quid, I know they bring the prices down. But it's not an easy place to get to after work. Some people, they work until 6 o'clock, and particularly with the road closure. I was amazed because I went in on the tram before 6 o'clock, and the tram was heaving. It was, and
commuters, isn't it?
Yeah, and so it's not an easy ground to get to. So that combination of you working, it's a lot of money. Whichever way you look at it, even if it's only 30 quid a ticket, if it's 3, if it's 100 quid, and then and the traffic. Shall we miss a game? Let's miss that Leon game. I would say so. I think it's more about the. I don't think it was a big enough game in the eyes of people because of the structure of the Champions League at the early stages.
Now, as people are listening to this show tonight, and thanks very much for listening, and spread the word. Obviously, if people are just stumbling across Forever Blue, which is every Tuesday here on XS Manchester. Although I've got to say, next week is an exception. We're not actually here on the Tuesday because City are playing Hoffenheim at 6 o'clock. And it is a 6 o'clock kickoff in the UK. We're actually going to do our Forever Blue show on the Monday night, so that on the Tuesday night we can actually be live while potentially the goals are going in Hoffenheim. And since I'll be in Germany, I won't be part of the show on Tuesday, but I will be part of the show on Monday. So just bear that in mind. But normally we're here 6 till 7 on a Tuesday. But now we're recording this on a Monday evening because I will be at Oxford as we're building up to this game. So slightly different tonight. Rather than go into a lot of detail talking about the games, which I'm sure we've already touched on, we've also got the very esteemed Dr. Gary James here, who is he is the man, the definitive Manchester City expert, and I say that without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, and I'm sure you would go along with that, David.
Yeah, Gary very kindly read my book after Joe Lake had completed it for accuracy. I think he made, so she did such a good job, and to be fair, I worked pretty hard at it as well, but I think Gary came up with, I had this team that I used to sing when I was a kid. It was McRae, Hammond, Donachie, Doyle, Booth, Oaks, Somerby, Bell, Marsh, Hartford and Chewett, and Gary's point was I don't think that team ever played. Certainly Mickey Hammond I don't think played. But I said, well, I agree with you, but that was the song, So that's the kind of detail that Gary's gathered over the years. So.
Well, on the basis that Gary obviously is, and I don't do this in a sort of creepy way. I genuinely believe this. There's nobody comes close. One thing I can claim, however, Gary, but you can talk about David because I think I saw every minute that David played in the first team, and I was only weighing up the other day when Aguero made his 300th appearance playing in that game. I bet I'm the only person, apart from Sergio Aguero, who's actually been at every game that he's played in every one of the 300 games, because I was at the game behind closed doors in Moscow, and how many all the journalists don't go to every game, all the team don't go to every game. I bet I'm the only one. But you are the expert, Gary, having all that build-up on David's time and career, and that you brought out a book which we're going to talk about, which is Manchester City Folklore. Great Christmas present, of course. But it's about all sorts of things. Well, you tell me. It's about all sorts of things. And what about David's era? How does that fit in?
Well, I mean, to be fair, David's era, David's about a week older than me, I think. It's not, there's not much difference in our age. But so for me, the 80s were that same sort of period. So as we had the youth team developing, winning the FA Youth Cup in 86 and developing into a first team, as a fan, I'm developing on the Kippax and I'm watching those games, and it meant, certainly at that age, it meant so much to me. And I, every minute of the 80s, even though we had some awful periods at times, the relegation in 83 and the relegation in 87 as well, it was such an exciting period, and it did feel as if we were all in it together. And I certainly remember Dave running up and down in front of on the wing in front of the Kippax, and it meant something, feeling as if that's one of us. You know what I mean? It feeling as if David wasn't playing, I'm sure you'd have been on the Kippax, or you'd have been in the stadium somewhere. You'd have wanted to be there. And so the 80s was a great time. You've got to think as well, in the 80s, there were so many issues in football, obviously the disasters, Heysel and Hillsborough and Sutton Bradford, of course. And so football fans were perceived as being violent, hooligans and so on. But at City, it was a bit different. At City, we had the inflatable banana craze, and we just basically had a bit of a laugh,
How did that start? Come on, I mean, I think I know, but you know.
Yeah, well, there's a guy called Frank Newton, actually, who... for some reason, he took a demonstration inflatable banana to a game. And, it was a bit of a laugh from the terraces. And then I remember being at Oldham Athletic, in the second division, obviously, and suddenly there was like 2 or 3 bananas. And week on week, it started to increase. And then it became nicknamed, because obviously Imre Varada was playing for City, it became nicknamed Imre Banana, because it fit with a chant that we used to do for Imre Varada. And it kept building up and building up. And then it coincided with the fanzines being developed, Blueprint, then King of the Kippax, obviously, and Electric Blue. And they started to promote the idea of going to games in fancy dress. So we had the Stoke fancy dress game, which for those, who don't really know, this was absolutely incredible at the time, because there we were, playing in the second division. We were going to play Stoke over Christmas. Stoke was at the old Victoria Ground. City's away following was always quite decent, but for that game we took over 12,000 fans, which was more than half the capacity of the stadium. Stoke handed over an entire side of the ground, plus most of the behind the goal, a paddock behind the goal, and fans arrived in fancy dress, carrying inflatable bananas, and it was just an incredible day. City, unfortunately, City being City at that time, the result didn't go our way.
That's because we were in fancy dress.
And the players actually came out carrying inflatable bananas. Now, I'm not certain if that was a good idea or what, but from a fan's point of view, again, it felt as if there was a connection there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that day particularly well, walking around the corner and seeing everybody in fancy dress, and I knew they were going to do it. We didn't have social media in those days, but through the fanzines and through all the communications, you knew they were going to do it. But there's something a bit surreal of seeing like 5,000 Blues Brothers walking around the corner, or what, Frankenstein coming towards you, whatever. But that is and obviously your book, City Folklore, captures these differences, the things that make City unique, because there's so many other fans of other clubs throw this City have got no history. What is history? History, just winning trophies, not to me.
Well, you talk about, empty seats and so on, and that drives me mad, and that was one of the reasons why I did this book, because I wanted to sort of paint the picture as it is. So, first of all, City won a major European trophy before Liverpool. But who knows? As the outside world doesn't accept that. But anyway, we did. Won major trophy 50 years before Chelsea, 30 years before Arsenal, and it goes on. But in terms of the game, the Lyon game, that crowd of 41,000 was significantly bigger than a lot of United's crowds in the Champions League during the 1990s. We're just at a different stage of development.
Yeah.
Europe doesn't quite mean now, at the moment, what it does to Manchester United and Liverpool, because to be fair, they have enjoyed Champions League success, in the last 2 decades. We haven't. So we're just at a different stage, and I'm convinced that given another 5 years, there won't be any question about whether there's 50,000 a game against Lyon, in the group stage. It'll happen. But at the moment, we just haven't quite got to that stage, that's all. But 41,000 for, in essence, a fairly meaningless Champions League game is incredible.
With 2 weeks' notice as well.
Absolutely.
We'll come back and talk about... go on.
So, just very quickly, the original capacity at the stadium was not a lot more than that. I think that would be what we used to get 2003, 2004...
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, if we'd have been playing at Main Road, it would have been full. It would have been a sellout. Then would we have said, look at the loyalty. Chelsea play in a smaller stadium, so it's easier for them to sell out.
That's all true.
And Liverpool's crowd at weekend, when it only just 50,000 for a Premier League game, when their capacity is over 54.
Very good points. We'll come back to you too in just a second, and we're also going to speak to Nader Manua, former City player. You're listening to Forever Blue, XS Manchester 106.1 FM. In the studio with me is David White, former City winger, and Dr. Gary James. Do you like being called Doctor?
Just call me Gazzo, Gary, I'm not fine.
Well, I love the doctor bit, I mean, I'm looking forward to calling you Professor Gary James. It's got to be coming soon,
Maybe.
hasn't it?
You never know.
And talking of professors, blimey, now we've got a very intelligent footballer joining us from the US of A, a certain Mr. Nader Manua, who always outthinks me whenever I talk to him, so not that's particularly hard. And he joins us now. Nader, you all right?
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Yeah. How are you?
What's it like out in Salt Lake City and your new venture?
Well, it's very hot at the minute, I'll be honest, very dry, so I'm really not used to these conditions at all. Not at all.
You're not complaining, are you? It's been raining here this week and cold.
Hey, yeah. In Manchester, you're being serious? Never been heard of that. Yeah, it's been good to me so far. Learning a lot about the city and the way they play football or soccer over here and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm in a good place.
Now, before we talk to you about the football, because obviously that's your area of expertise. Well, one of your areas of expertise.
Yeah.
Gary James has got this book out called City Folklore, and you're a local lad. You grew up in Clayton, and you're a City fan. So just like Phil Foden, you're one of our own, and all that sort of stuff. So, what did City Folklore mean to you? Do you always buy in as a player, as a kid growing up, into the stories around the club as much as the actual football?
I think it's very much like person to person, to be honest. Because I remember when I was younger. So I was really started supporting the team from probably around 7, 8, and shortly after when I was signed, and I was doing the ball boying and things like this. So I was going into the Main Road at the time, and I was getting the programs from like the mid 80s, early 90s, and stuff like this. So I was really, really buying into it, But that's not necessarily the same way that everyone else took that ends up being a fan of the club, if you know what I mean.
But the humour, I mean, that obviously, I'm sure Gary will nod along to this one. The humour is so central to City. Was that something that you picked up on as a kid as well?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Especially the way that, the club has obviously been successful, but the measure of success in recent years is far different to what it was, say, when I first started watching. So you're always, you could take yourself seriously, but you couldn't take yourself too seriously just because in the grand scheme of things, you weren't really competing with it. So people would always laugh and joke, and, I think there's this thing that if you support City in the 90s, early 2000s, chances are you're almost always expecting something to go wrong. Whereas this new generation of fans, they're expecting things to go right, otherwise they're just unhappy. You know what I mean?
Does that mean the club's changing then?
Changing, you say? Changing.
Changed then.
It changed. Maybe just a fraction from where it was, because the big thing for me over the past month or 2 months has been the fact that I've had to do lots of talks about, say, what happened 10 years ago. But what happened 10 years before that? Was that not the Division 2 playoff final? That was 10 years before that. And now we're talking about being disappointed because they've lost in the Champions League first game when they were one of the favourites to win it. So I think change has definitely happened.
Do you get that? You're obviously only putting your foot in the water of it at the moment because you've not been in America for long, but you get that feeling in America that the people who follow City over there are following them just because they're a successful team?
Yeah, I'd say 100%, to be honest with you. Like, you do have fans who like the origins and, their fan base and stuff like this, but I think the way that Pep's got them playing a certain brand of football, people are buying into it because it's what they want to see, it's how they want to see the game being played. So you're getting more casual fans, kind of in the same way Arsenal had a lot of casual supporters around, the time of being invincible and all that stuff. Arsenal seemed to be everyone's second favourite team because they were doing something that was a bit different. But, that's all gone now. But, yeah, they do have more supporters buying in. I wouldn't necessarily call them glory seekers as such, but I think they appreciate what's going on there and how it's different from normal, but it's definitely something which they'd like to be behind, if you know what I mean.
I know you played for QPR for a long time, Naden, but is it City that they always talk to you about, fans?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like, my time at QPR, as crazy as it may seem, ends up being half of my career, potentially, at this moment, at this moment in time.
That's why I asked the question, because it is split, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but I think the way that I see myself, because I spent the years that I spent down there, but home was always north. So the association with Manchester City was the thing which, that's what I want. When my career is done, I'll speak about everything that I have done. But the bit that stays closest to my heart is the fact that I played for my boyhood team. And I was there from 10 years of age through to 25, 26 or whatever it was. So there's a split in terms of people that, that will come and talk to me about football. But the fact is, I'm lucky enough to have played with certain members in the squad now. So I can always talk about those times and make it relatable to what people are seeing on TV and stuff like that. Where, say, you tend to sometimes get to a point where all your connections are gone. So you're looking at a brand new team. But the fact is there's still people within the side who I can relate to and who I can speak to. So, I still for now, I still kind of feel part of that, even though I was away for 6.5 years.
Listen, Naden, you're always going to be part of it. Even when those players have moved on, you are part of City's history. And because of your connection to Manchester and the very things you've said in this show, people aren't going to forget you, are they?
Yeah, it's one of those things, to be fair. I'm not one of those that craves attention or wants to be remembered and so on and so forth, but I remember those times fondly. I think I appreciated them then, but I appreciate them a lot more after I left, because it's very rare that you'll spend years playing for your local side. You know what I mean? Like, most people's careers start and they have to move straight away, but I didn't have to move till I was in my mid-20s, and it's one of those things. I was sad to leave, but then I had to have a career. But to have spent those years of my career playing for Man City and to see where they are now and to the experiences I had there it's incredible.
I know obviously you're playing over there yourself and there's a time difference, but have you had a chance to watch the Lyon game and the Cardiff game, the recent matches?
The Cardiff game, not so much the Lyon one. I think it's the time difference is so tricky over here because we're more toward the west. Like, if you say City have an early kickoff, then that's 5:30 in the morning. So for as much as I do like to support the Blues, I do also quite like to sleep as well. It's just a bit too soon. If it was an hour later, then is what it is. But yeah, I'm always trying to see what's going on and watch it. I didn't see the Lyon game, but I did see the Cardiff game. I'm glad that they had that response, because people were you could almost feel like the criticism was about to begin. People saying, well, are they the real deal, are they this, are they that? But I'll tell you for a fact, going to Cardiff, although they've not won yet, that's not an easy fixture. That'll be one of the most competitive games that they're playing all season. But the fact that they still managed to dismantle them probably says a lot about, where the squad are at, or where the squad is at, rather. And it's not one whereby people are doubting themselves or they're lacking confidence.
I'm going to open the floor now, Naden, to the two guys who are with me here, Dr. Gary James and David White, who is a City player who doesn't have any relationship with any of the players in the team at the moment, so he can relate 100% to where you'll be in a few more years. Now, Gary, having written the folklore book, I wonder if there's anything you want to ask Naden.
Actually, what I was going to say is that from a sort of history point of view, if you like, Naden's time at City was really important because that stability that we developed in the Premier League, making sure that for the first time in 20 years, really, we were a stable Premier League side was really important. And obviously, Naden's always going to have a special place because he's a Manchester, Manchester lad. He's one of us, just like David is, So you will remember that forever. But certainly without Naden and that generation of players, would the Sheikh ever have invested in City?
Is it all down to you, Naden?
Essentially, yeah. I think that's what it boils down to. You've got all the pieces. Just put them together, and you see that you've painted the picture perfectly. There's no difference between this side now and the side that I played in, where we didn't score a goal at home for 4 months. You know, it's basically the same thing.
See, there's that humour. That's why you know that he's a City fan, don't you? Hey, it's a bit drier than yours, Davey, but it's there, isn't it?
I'm sure it is. Yeah, I think obviously when you've been at club for so long, I was there from 10 to 26. I think when you're still playing, you kind of do get a bit detached from it a little. That was certainly my experience, and I think also that there's so many difficult. At the time after I left, for the sort of next 10 years between 93, 2003, there was an awful lot of difficulty at the club, wasn't there? So I got quite a way detached from it, and obviously with kids and this. In fairness, I got quite a way detached from football. And then, to be honest with you, probably when I sat down to write my book and brought back all the memories, not just of when I was playing, but from being a sort of 5-year-old and being a kid and hearing my dad would sing to me about the sort of mid-50s team and the late 60s team, and it just, one of the most important things that's ever happened to me is all of that flooding back, and it's great to be so close to the club again.
So you're going to write a book, Naden, following David's footsteps and Dr. Gary